based on authoritative scriptures. And one must hear from persons who are actually in knowledge. As a result of such discussion in the association of devotees, one comes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then the first thing one must do is surrender to Him. The description of that place where, having gone, one never returns to, this false reflected tree is given hell. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original root from whom everything has emanated. To gain the fame of the Personality of Godhead, one has only to surrender, and this is a result of performing devotional service by hearing, chanting, etc. He is the cause of the extension of the material world. This has already been explained by the Lord Himself. Aham Sarvasya Prabhava. I am the origin of everything. Therefore, to get out of the entanglement of this strong banyan tree of material life, one must surrender to Krishna. As soon as one surrenders unto Krishna, one becomes detached automatically from this material extension.
All right, you can hold that. Text 5. Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivrita kama dvandvair vimukta sukha dukha samgair gachanti amudha padam avyayam tat. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, and who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who unbewildered know how to surrender unto the person, the Supreme Person, attain to that Supreme Kingdom. Purport. The surrendering process is described here very nicely. The first qualification is that one should not be deluded by pride, because the conditioned soul is puffed up thinking himself the Lord of material nature. It is very difficult for him to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should know by the cultivation of real knowledge that he is not Lord of material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Lord. When one is free from delusion caused by pride, he can begin the process of surrender. For one who is always expecting some honor in this material world, it is not possible to surrender to the Supreme Person. Pride is due to illusion, for although one comes here, stays for a brief time and then goes away, he has the foolish notion that he is the Lord of the world. He thus makes all things complicated, and he is always in trouble. The whole world moves under this impression. People are considering the land, this earth, to belong to human society, and they have divided the land under the false impression that they are the proprietors. One has to get out of this false notion that human society is the proprietor of this world. When one is freed from such a false notion, he becomes free from all the false associations caused by familial, social, and national affections. These faulty associations bind one to this material world. After this stage, one has to develop spiritual knowledge. One has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own and what is actually not his own. And when one has an understanding of things as they are, he becomes free from all dual conceptions such as happiness and distress, pleasure and pain. He becomes full in knowledge. And then it is possible for him to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 6. Na tad bhasayate suryo na shashankho na pavaka yad gatva na nivartante tadhama paramam mama. That supreme abode of mine is not illuminated by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. Purport. The spiritual world, the abode of the personality of Godhead, Krishna, which is known as Krishna Loka, Goloka Vrindavan, is described here. In the spiritual sky, there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, fire, or electricity, because all planets are self-luminous. We have only one planet in this universe, the Sun, which is self-luminous. But all the planets in the spiritual sky are self-luminous. The shining effulgence of all those planets, called Vaikunthas, constitutes the shining sky known as the Brahma Jyoti. Actually, the effulgence is emanating from the planet of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavan. Part of that shining effulgence is covered by the Mahatattva, the material world. Other than this, the major portion of that shining sky is full of spiritual planets, which are called Vaikunthas, chief of which is Goloka Vrindavan. As long as the living entity is in this dark material world, he is in conditioned life. But as soon as he reaches the spiritual sky, by cutting through the false, perverted tree of this material world, he becomes liberated. Then there is no chance of his coming back here. In his conditioned life, the living entity considers himself to be the Lord of this material world. But in his liberated state, he enters into the spiritual kingdom and becomes an associate of the Supreme Lord. There he enjoys eternal bliss, eternal life, and full knowledge. One should be captivated by this information. He should desire to transfer himself to that eternal world and extricate himself from this false reflection of reality. For one who is too much attached to this material world, it is very difficult to cut that attachment. But if he takes the Krishna consciousness, there is a chance of gradually becoming detached. One has to associate himself with devotees, those who are in Krishna consciousness. One should search out a society dedicated to Krishna consciousness and learn how to discharge devotional service. In this way, he can cut off his attachment to the material world. One cannot become detached from the attraction of the material world simply by dressing himself in saffron cloth. He must become attached to the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, one should take it very seriously that devotional service, as described in the 12th chapter, is the only way to get out of this false representation of the real tree. In chapter 14, the contamination of all kinds of processes by material nature are described. Only devotional service is described as purely transcendental. The words paramam mama are very important here. Actually, every nook and corner is the property of the Supreme Lord. But the spiritual world is paramount, full of six opulences. The Katha Upanishad 2.2.15 also confirms that in the spiritual world there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, or stars. Na tatra suryo bhati na chandra tarakam. For the whole spiritual sky is illuminated by the internal potency of the Supreme Lord. That supreme abode can be achieved only by surrender and by no other means. Alright, so you can go ahead and read from text 7. And that's you, Raghunandan. There's no one else right now.
Haribol. Text 7. Mama Vamsu Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana Mana Sashani Varyani Praptistami Karasati. Translation. The living entity in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with six senses, which includes the mind. Purport. In this verse the identity of the living being is clearly given. The living entity is the fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. Eternally, it is not that he assumes individuality in his conditioned life, and in his liberated state becomes one with the Supreme Lord. He is eternally fragmented. It is clearly said, Sanatana, according to the Vedic version, the Supreme Lord himself, the Supreme Lord manifests and expands himself in innumerable expansions, of which the primary expansions are called Vishnu Tattvas, and the secondary expansions are called the living entities. In other words, the Vishnu Tattvas is the personal expansions, and the living entities are the separated expansion. By his personal expansion, he is manifested in various forms like Rama, Narasimhadeva, Vishnu, and all the predominating deities in the Vaikuntha planets. The separated expansions, the living entities, are eternally servitors. The personal expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the individual identities of the Godhead are always present. Similarly, the separated expansions of the living entities, the separated expansions of living entities have the identities as fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. The living entities also have fragmental portions of these qualities, of which independent is one. Every living entity is an individual soul, has his personal individuality and a minute form of independence. By misuse of the independence, one becomes a conditioned soul. And by proper use of independence, he is always liberated. In either case, he is qualitatively eternal, as the Supreme Lord is. In his liberated state, he is freed from the material condition, and he is under the engagement of transcendental service unto the Lord. In his conditioned life, he is dominated by the material moods of nature, and he forgets the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As a result, he has to struggle very hard to maintain his existence in the material world. The living entity is not only human beings and the cats and dogs, but even the greater controllers of the material world. Brahma, Lord Shiva, and even Vishnu are all parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. They are all eternal, not temporary manifestations. The word Karshati, struggling or grappling hard, is very significant. The conditioned soul is bound up as though shackled by iron chains. He is bound up by the false ego, and the mind is the chief agent which is driving him in this material existence. When the mind is in the mood of goodness, his activities are good. When the mind is in the mood of passion, his activities are troublesome. And when the mind is in the mood of ignorance, he travels in the lower species of life. It is clear, however, in this book that the conditioned soul is covered by the material body with the mind and the senses, and when it is liberated, this material covering perishes, but his spiritual body manifests itself in its individual capacity. The following information is there in the Madhyanina Shruti. Savi Isha Brahma Nishta Idam Saviram Matyam Atishyad Brahma Visham Padya Brahmana Pasyati Brahmana Srinoti Brahmana Savam Anubhavati. It is stated here that when the living entity give up his material embodiment and enter into the spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body. And in his spiritual body, he can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He can hear and speak to him face to face, and he can understand the Supreme Personality as he is. From Smriti also it is understood Pasanti Yatra Purusha Savi Vaikuntara Mutaya. In the spiritual planets, everyone lives in body features like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As far as bodily construction is concerned, there is no difference between the part and parcels, living entities, and the expansions of Vishnumurti. In other words, at liberation, the living entity gets a spiritual body by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word mama ivasma vamsa, fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord are also significant. The fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken parts. We have already understood in this chapter, in the second chapter, that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. This fragment is not materially conceived. It is not like matter, which can be cut into species and joined together again. That conception is not applicable here, because the Sanskrit word sanatana, eternal, is used. The fragmental portion is eternal. It is also stated in the beginning of the second chapter that in each and every individual body, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is present. That fragmental portion, when liberated from the bodily entanglement, revives its original spiritual body in the spiritual sky, in a spiritual planet, and enjoys association with the Supreme Lord. It is, however, understood here that the living entity, being the fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one with the Lord, just as the parts and parcels of God are also gold. Parts and parcels of gold are also gold.
All right, you can hold that. Okay. Text 8. Shariram yad avapnoti yachapi utkramateshvara grihe vaitani samyati vayurgandam ivashayat. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. So forth. Here the living entity is described as Ishvara, the controller of his own body. If he likes, he can change his body to a higher grade, and if he likes, he can move to a lower class. Minute independence is there. The change his body undergoes depends upon him. At the time of death, the consciousness he has created will carry him to the next type of body. If he has made his consciousness like that of a cat or a dog, he is sure to change to a cat or a dog's body. And if he has fixed his consciousness on godly qualities, he will change into the form of a demigod. And if he is in Krishna consciousness, he will be transferred to Krishna Loka in the spiritual world and will associate with Krishna. It is a false claim that after the annihilation of this body, everything is finished. The individual soul is transmigrating from one body to another, and his present body and present activities are the background of his next body. One gets a different body according to karma, and he has to quit this body in due course. It is stated here that the subtle body, which carries the conception of the next body, develops another body in the next life. The process of transmigrating from one body to another and struggling while in the body is called karishati, or struggle for existence. In text 9. The living at Shrotam Chakshu Sparshanam Cha Rasanam Grahanam Eva Cha Adishtaya Manaschayam Vishaya Nupasevate. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of air, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular sense of a set of sense objects. In other words, the living entity adulterates his consciousness with the qualities of cats and dogs. In his next life, he gets a cat or dog body and enjoys. Consciousness is originally pure like water, but if he mix water with a certain color, it changes. Similarly, consciousness is pure, for the spirit soul is pure, but consciousness is changed according to the association of the material qualities. Real consciousness is Krishna consciousness. When therefore one is situated in Krishna consciousness, he is in his pure life, but if his consciousness is adulterated by some type of material mentality, in the next life he gets a corresponding body. He does not necessarily get a human body again. He can get the body of a cat, dog, hog, demigod, or one of the many other forms, for there are 8,400,000 species. In text 10. Utkramantam shtitam vapi bhunjanam va gunanvitam vimudha nanu pashyanti jnana chakshusha. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. So forth. The word jnana chakshu is very significant. Without knowledge, one cannot understand how a living entity leaves his present body, nor what form of body he is going to take in the next life, nor even why he is living in a particular type of body. This requires a great amount of knowledge, understood from Bhagavad Gita and similar literatures heard from a bona fide spiritual master. One who is trained to perceive all these things is fortunate. Every living entity is quitting his body under certain circumstances. He is living under certain circumstances, and he is enjoying under certain circumstances under the spell of material nature. As a result, he is suffering different kinds of happiness and distress under the illusion of sense enjoyment. Persons who are everlastingly fooled by lust and desire lose all power to understand their change of body, and they stay in a particular body. They cannot comprehend it. Those who have developed spiritual knowledge, however, can see that the spirit is different from the body and is changing its body and enjoying in different ways. A person with such knowledge can understand how the conditioned living entity is suffering in this material world. Therefore, those who are highly developed in Krishna consciousness try their best to give this knowledge to the people in general, for their life is conditional and is very much troublesome. They should come out of it and be Krishna conscious and liberate themselves to transfer to the spiritual world. Text 11. Yatanto yogina chainam pashyanti atmani avashtitam yatantopi akritatmano nainam pashyanti chetasa. The endeavoring transcendentalist, who is situated in self-realization, can clearly see all this. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot understand what is taking place, even though they might try. Purport. There are many transcendentalists on the path of spiritual realization, but one who is not situated in self-realization cannot see how things are changing in the body of the living entity. The word yogina is significant in this connection. In the present day, there are many so-called yogis. There are many so-called associations of yogis. But they are actually blind in the matter of self-realization. They are simply addicted to some sort of gymnastic exercise and are satisfied if the body is well-built and healthy. They have no other information. They are called yatantopi akritatmana. Even though they are endeavoring in a so-called yoga system, they are not self-realization. They are not self-realized. Such people cannot understand the process of transmigration of the soul. Only those who are actually in the yoga system have realized the self, the world, and the Supreme Lord. In other words, the Bhakti yogis, those who engage in pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness, can understand things, how they're taking place. So, you can continue, Raghunandan, from text 12. I think you're muted, Raghunandan.
Yeah, I'll come in. Yeah, I was on meeting. We don't have the number of meeting a little bit. You have to go to the other page. Okay, text 12. Yad aditya gatam tiho chagad bahasa yati kailam yach chandra masi yach chagnu katiho vidi mamakam. Translation. The splendor of the sun which dissipates the darkness of this world come from me, and the splendor of the moon and the splendor of fire are also from me. Purple. The unintelligent cannot understand how things are taking place, but one can begin to be established in knowledge by understanding what the Lord explains here. Everyone sees the sun, moon, fire, and electricity. One should simply try to understand that the splendor of the sun, the splendor of the moon, and the splendor of electricity or fire are coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In such a conception of life, the beginning of Krishna consciousness lies. A great deal of advancement for the conditioned soul in this material world. The living entities are essentially the part and parcels of the Supreme Lord, and He is giving here with the hint how they can come back to Godhead, back to home. From this verse, we can understand that the sun is illuminating the whole solar system. There are different universes and solar system, and there are different suns, moons, and planets also. But in each universe, there is only one sun, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 10:21. The moon is one of the stars. Nakshastranam aham shashi. Sunlight is due to the spiritual effulgence in the spiritual sky of the Supreme Lord. With the rise of the sun, the activities of human beings are set up. They set fire to prepare the foodstuff. They set fire to start the factories, etc. So many things are done with the help of fire. Therefore, sunrise, fire, and moonlight are so pleasing to the living entities. Without their help, no living entity can live. So if one can understand that the living entity, if one can understand that the light and the splendor of the sun, moon, and fire are emanating from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, then one's Krishna consciousness will begin. By the moonshine, all the vegetables are nourished. The moonshine is so pleasing that people can easily understand that they are living by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Without His mercy, there cannot be sun. Without His mercy, there cannot be moon. And without His mercy, there cannot be fire. And Without the help of sun, moon and fire, no one can live. There are some thoughts to provoke Krishna consciousness in. These are some thoughts to provoke Krishna consciousness in the conditioned soul. Text 13. Gam avisya cha bhutani darayami aham ujasa pushmanami kushadhi sava samo bodhva rasatmaka. Translation. I enter into each planet, and by my energy they stay in orbit. I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. Purport. It is understood that all the planets are floating in the air only by the energy of the Lord. The Lord enters into every atom, every planet, and every living being. This is discussed in the Brahma Samhita. It is said here that one planetary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No. Let me see. I missed a line. The Lord enters into every atom, every planet, every living being. That is discussed in the Brahma Samhita. It is said here that one planetary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Paramatma, enters into the planet, the universe, the living entities, and even into the atom. So due to his entrance, everything is appropriately manifested. When the spirit soul is there, man can float on the water, but when the living spark is out of the body and the body is dead, the body sinks. Of course, when it is decomposed, it floats just like straws and other living things. But as soon as the man is dead, he at once sinks in the water. Similarly, all these planets are floating in space, and this is due to the entrance of the supreme energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His energy is sustaining each planet, just like a handful of dust. If someone releases a handful of dust, there is no possibility of the dust falling, but if one throws it in the air, it will fall again. Similarly, these planets which are floating in the air are actually held in the fist of the universal form of the Supreme Lord. By his strength and energy, all moving and non-moving things stays in their place. It is said in the Vedic hymn that because of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sun is shining and the planets are steadily moving. Were it not for him, all the planets would scatter like dust in the air and perish. Similarly, it is due to the Supreme Personality of Godhead that the moon nourishes all vegetables due to the moon influence. The vegetables become delicious. Without the moon's shine, the vegetable can neither grow nor taste succulent. Human society is living comfortably and enjoying food due to the supply from the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, mankind could not survive. The word Rasat Maka is very significant. Everything becomes practical by the agency of the Supreme Lord through the influence of the moon.
All right. So you can hold that. All right. So text 14. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashrita Pranapana Samayukta Pachami Anand Chaturvidham. I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the four kinds of foodstuff. According to Ayurvedic Shastra, we understand that there is fire in the stomach, which digests all food sent there. When the fire is not blazing, there is no hunger. And when the fire is in order, we become hungry. Sometimes when the fire is not going nicely, treatment is required. In any case, this fire is representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vedic mantra, Brihat Aranyaka Upanishad 591, also confirmed that the Supreme Lord or Brahman is situated in the form of fire within the stomach and is digesting all kinds of foodstuffs. Ayam Agnir Vaisnavanaro Yoyam Manta Purushe Yenedam Anam Pachyate. Therefore, since he is helping digestion of all kinds of foodstuffs, the living entity is not independent in the eating process. Unless the Supreme Lord helps him in digesting, there is no possibility of eating. Thus he introduces and digests foodstuff, and by his grace we are enjoying life. In the Vedanta Sutra 1.2.27, this is also confirmed. Sabda dibyo nta patishtanakcha. The Lord is situated within sound and within the body, within the air, and even within the stomach, as the digestive force. There are four kinds of foodstuffs. Some are drunk, some are chewed, some are licked up, and some are sucked. And he is the digestive force for all of them. In text 15, Sarvasya chaham shri sanivishto mata smriti jnanam apohanam cha vedaicha sarvayam aham eva vedyo vedanta krid veda ved eva chaham. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. The Supreme Lord is situated as Paramatma in everyone's heart, and it is from him that all activities are initiated. The living entity forgets everything of his past life, but he has to act according to the direction of the Supreme Lord, who is witness to all his work. Therefore he begins his work according to his past deeds. Required knowledge is supplied to him, and remembrance is given to him, and he forgets also about his past life. Thus the Lord is not only all-pervading, he is also localized in every individual heart. He awards that different fruitive results. He is worshipable not only as the impersonal Brahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the localized Paramatma, but as the form of the incarnation of the Vedas as well. The Vedas give the right direction so they can properly mold their lives and come back to Godhead, back to home. The Vedas offer knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and Krishna, in his incarnation as Vyasadeva, is the compiler of the Vedanta Sutra. The commentation on the Vedanta Sutra by Vyasadeva in the Srimad Bhagavatam gives real understanding of Vedanta Sutra. The Supreme Lord is so full that for the deliverance of the conditioned soul, he is the supplier and digester of foodstuff, the witness of his activity, and the giver of knowledge in the form of Vedas. And as the Supreme Personality of God as Sri Krishna, the teacher of Bhagavad Gita, he is worshipable by the conditioned soul. Thus God is all good, God is all merciful. Anta pravishta shasta jnanam, Anta pravishta shasta jananam. The living entity forgets as soon as he quits his present body, but he begins work again, initiated by the Supreme Lord. Although he forgets, the Lord gives him the intelligence to renew his work where he ended his last life. So not only does the living entity enjoy or suffer in this world according to the dictation from the Supreme Lord, situated locally in the heart, but he receives the opportunity to understand the Vedas from him. If one is serious about understanding the Vedic knowledge, then Krishna gives the required intelligence. Why does he present the Vedic knowledge for understanding? Because a living entity individually needs to understand Krishna. Vedic literature confirms this. Yosau sarvair vedair giyate. In all Vedic literature beginning from the four Vedas, Vedanta Sutra, and the Upanishads and Puranas, the glories of the Supreme Lord are celebrated. By performance of Vedic rituals, discussion of the Vedic philosophy, and worship of the Lord in devotional service, he is attained. Therefore, the purpose of the Vedas is to understand Krishna. The Vedas give us direction by which to understand Krishna and the process of realizing him. The ultimate goal is the personality of Godhead. Vedanta Sutra 114 confirms this in the following words. Chatu Samanvayat. One can attain perfection in 3 stages. By understanding Vedic literature, one can understand his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By performing the different processes, one can approach him, and at the end one can attain the Supreme Goal, who is no other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this verse, the purpose of the Vedas, the understanding of the Vedas, and the goal of the Vedas are clearly defined. Alright, so you can continue from 16.
That's the same thing, like yours. Second.
Okay, how about text 16? Viva Irupusuloki Kesaras Chak Sara Ivacha Kesara Savani Bhutani Kotatiho Kesara Uchyate. Translation. There are 2 classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible. And in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. Purport. As already explained, the Lord in his incarnation as Vaisnava compiled the Vedanta Sutra. Here the Lord is giving in summary the contents of the Vedanta Sutra. He says that the living entities who are innumerable can be divided in 2 classes, the fallible and the infallible. The living entities are eternally separated parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When they are in contact with the material world, they are called Jiva Bhuta. And the Sanskrit word given here, Kesara Savani Bhutani, means that they are fallible. Those who are in oneness with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, are called infallible. Oneness does not mean that they have no individuality, but that there is no disunity. They are all agreeable to the purpose of the creation. Of course, in the spiritual world, there is no such thing as creation. But since the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as stated in the Vedanta Sutra, is the source of all emanations, that conception is explained. According to the statement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, there are 2 classes of living entities. The Vedas gives evidence of this. So there is no doubt about it. The living entities who are struggling in this world with the mind and 5 senses have the material bodies which are changing as long as the living entity is conditioned. His body changes due to contact with matter. Matter is changing, so the living entity appears to be changing. But in the spiritual world, the body is not made of matter. Therefore, there is no change. In the material world, the living entity undergoes 6 changes: both growth, duration, reproduction, then dwindling and vanishing. These are the changes of the material body, but in the spiritual world, the body does not change. There is no old age, there is no birth, there is no death. They all exist in oneness. Krisara Savani, Botany. Any living entity who has come in contact with matter, beginning from the first created being, Brahma, down to a small ant, is changing its body. Therefore, they are all fallible. In the spiritual world, however, they are always liberated in oneness. Text 17. Utama Purusatu Anya Paramatniti Udarita Nuluka Triyam Avishya Vibhati Avyaya Isvara. Translation. Beside these two, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them upward. The idea of this verse is very nicely expressed in the Katha Upanishad 2:13 and Sutta Upanishad 6:13. It is clearly stated here that above the innumerable entities, some of whom are conditioned and some of whom are liberated, there is the Supreme Personality who is Paramatma. The Upanishadic verse runs as follows. Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam. The purport is that among all the living entities, both conditions and liberated, there is one Supreme Living Personality, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who maintains them and gives them all the facility of enjoyment according to different work. That Supreme Personality of Godhead is situated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. A wise man who can understand him is eligible to attain perfect peace, not others. Text 18. Yasmat Kisharam Atitoham Aksharat Apichutamaha Atusmiloki Vidicha Rastitita Purushotamaha. Translation. Because I am transcendental beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as the Supreme Person. Purport. No one can surpass the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, neither the conditioned souls nor the liberated souls. He is therefore the greatest of personalities. Now it is clear that the living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead are individuals. The difference is that the living entities, either in the conditioned state or in the liberated state, cannot surpass in quantity, in inconceivable potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is incorrect to think of the Supreme Lord and the living entities as being on the same level or equal in all respect. There is always the question of superiority and inferiority between the personalities. The word Uttama is very significant. No one can surpass the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word Loki signifies in the Purusha Agama, the Smriti scriptures, as confirmed in the Nirukti dictionary, Lokyati Virato Nina. The purpose of the Vedas is explained by the Smriti scriptures. The Supreme Lord in his localized aspect of Paramatma is also described in the Vedas themselves. The following verse appears in the Vedas Chandogya Upanishad 8:12-3. Tavat Isha Samprasado Smach Charivat Samutaya Param Jyotirupam Sampadya Surena Rupina Binispadyati Sa Utama Purusha The super soul coming out of the body enters the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. Then in his form he remains in his spiritual identity. That supreme is called the Supreme Personality of God, the Supreme Personality. This means that the Supreme Personality is exhibiting and diffusing his spiritual effulgence, which is the ultimate illumination. The Supreme Personality also has a localized aspect as Paramatma by incarnating himself as the son of Satyavati and Parasara. He explains the Vedic knowledge as Vyasadeva. Okay. Text 19. Oh, yeah, okay.
It's 8:33. All right, so basically this chapter is entitled The Yoga of the Supreme Person, and we're stopping at text 18. So initially it started talking about the form of the tree, with its roots upwards and branches downwards, and then there are roots coming downwards also, that are the fruitive activities of the living entities. So it is said that the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. So that's the secret, becoming detached from materialism, and then one must seek out the place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. So we use the weapon of detachment, and then we seek shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it is said, those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, they attain to that eternal kingdom. And Krishna said that supreme abode of mind is not illuminated by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. He also said the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. So this is what we do, struggling with the six senses that are headed by the mind. The living entity in the material world, he carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. And thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. So this is the transmigration of the soul from one body to another. Now the endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can clearly see all this. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try. So the devotees of the Supreme Lord, they know of the transference of one body, the living entity from one body to another. And they can understand that if we take Krishna consciousness and serve the Supreme Lord, we can become free from the repeated birth and death. But in the material situation, people have no concept of it. They're simply struggling. And then Krishna says, I'm in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So he gives us what we want. If we want to remember him, he'll help us. If we want knowledge, he'll give us that. If we want to forget him, he makes the arrangement also. And by all the Vedas, he said, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of the Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. So if we want to understand him, we have to take to the Shastra. So this is basically the yoga of the Supreme Person, and Krishna is telling us about himself throughout this chapter. And we have to understand that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and everything comes from him, and everything is supported and created and maintained by him. So we can stop here. Do you have any questions or comments on the subject matter? All right. So if not, we can go ahead and end here tonight. And Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
How you go? Lord, glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Ki jai.